Hello everybody and welcome to another core comparison video. In these videos I'm going to be comparing the revised core to the new core set in 2026 and kind of see how these cards align in terms of where I think their power level was for the OG core and how it impacted the game versus the new core. We're going to try to hypothesize of how strong we think these cards are going to be, how relevant they're going to be to the card pool, because ultimately that was one of the goals for the new core set, was to realign the classes, give them purpose, identity, and have their cards be more impactful and supported from just the core set. Because the original core set ultimately, I think, was successful in some ways, but was unsuccessful in others. For example, I think the Guardian and Seeker core set was probably the healthiest core set that we had for, like, the classes. But because of that, Mystics were not great. Survivors apparently were awful, what I learned doing the last one of these, and the Rogues, as we know, really had no foundation to build off of. So this is a very fun idea that I wanted to approach for myself, and then we can also revisit our core rankings for 2026 in a few years down the road, assuming I haven't been crushed by a piano until then. So let's talk about our tiers. We have Staple. So these are cards that you kind of have to find a reason not to play. They were just easily slotted into any deck that could run them, and they were kind of very overwhelming with their power level in some cases, or alternatively were just like so efficient that you put them in your deck and you never ever thought about taking them out or even upgrading them if they had upgraded versions in some cases. Strong, universally used. These are cards that, while not quite on the staple level, are cards that are very powerful and were used quite commonly in a vast majority of decks that that could play them. And like this is where the kind of the cards that are, you want them to be, I think, strong and universally used and good are the two categories that you want the majority of your cards to be in. And good cards are cards that are good. They might last the whole campaign, they might not last the whole campaign, but you're happy to have them in your deck and they will function very well and ultimately impact the game whenever you draw them and play them. Strong, narrowly used is, in my opinion, the second unhealthiest category within this tier list. So strong, narrowly used is a card that is very powerful, but only in one or two decks, only in one or two investigators, and they don't really leave your binder except for those investigators. And while they are very good within those investigators, and like they will impact the game very well within those investigators, they're not really impacting your collection in a way that I think is entirely relevant. A good example of this is Old Book of Lore with Daisy Walker. It's basically a second and third signature for Daisy Walker, but other investigators kind of look at it and be like, why would I spend my time doing this, right? And that's kind of where I think like cards are unhealthy, so that's what this is going to be for that one. Fine are cards that you don't really want to put into your deck, or you put them into your deck to upgrade out of them or upgrade into another version of them as soon as possible. Alternatively, they are cards that if you have a smaller collection, you are fine with running. But as you get a bigger collection, these cards will kind of cycle out of your play pattern, and they're not really what you're looking at doing. And then we have Space Waster, which is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a waste of space. I wish that there was anything else within this slot, and these cards just ended up never leaving the binder. We're going to start with the 45 automatic here. Spend an ammo to fight. I think I was never a big fan of the 45 automatic. I think, funnily enough, now saying this is going to sound like I'm just saying it just because of the new one existing. But I feel like it's slightly overcosted, and I've always felt that it was kind of slightly overcosted. I'm actually gonna put the 45 automatic in the fine category. This might be controversial, but I'm gonna be real with you. I have a lot of opinions about these cards that might seem slightly controversial as we go, but I never really see... I'll play 45 automatic because I have to play 45 automatic, you know? I need extra weapons to fight with. I need something to something to just like be my 5th or 6th weapon. I'm playing a firearm deck and I'm gonna play this one just because it's like the only one that exists, but I'm never really happy about rocking it. And I do think that if this costed 3, I would be more inclined to play it. But it doesn't cost 3, it actually costs 4, so it's just like a little bit harder for me to want to do this. I don't know how I feel about upgrading into the other version. And yeah, Holy Helicopter, you're 100% right. I'm recording this one. This is the first one of these core comparisons I'm doing with chat. I would, if I was building a deck and I had a full collection, I would put toe-to-toe instead of 45 automatic in my deck, 100%. And I'd also just put melee weapons like Machete, which turned out to be strong but universally used. I'm not going to say it's a staple because it was a staple for a time, but I don't think it's a staple anymore. I think that there are now stronger weapons, and melee weapons have a much higher ceiling that you can upgrade into, that I think ultimately means that Machete was kind of just outscaled in the long-term health of the game. But I do think that it's still a very strong card, and a lot of people will use it, but in the world of Blessed Blade 4, in the world of Cyclopean Hammer, in the world of Runic Axe, Machete is less of a staple than it was, and it's still a very strong card, but I think with the entire card collection, Machete has fallen out of favor slightly, but it's still a very powerful card. So I'm going to put it in strong and universally used. Shotgun is an interesting card. I think it's strong, but I think it's narrowly used. I've never seen someone play a shotgun deck and that deck was weak. Which is kind of funny because it actually is, but it's like with a full collection, right? Like shotgun is not a great card with a limited collection. I think we can all agree on that. But I think it's a very good card with a full collection and with the way you can support it and just make it more reliable. But at the same time, my gut feels tough putting this into the strong and narrowly used. But it really only has one deck, right? Shotgun only has one place that you play shotgun, and that's in a shotgun deck. Or like a firearm deck with it. But like even then, a lot of other firearms are kind of more fun to play around in other ways. Thank you for the sub, Necro Toaster. Much appreciated. I am a bit torn on where to put this one. So my gut is in between, realistically, strong, narrowly used, and fine. Which is kind of like a very big difference of where to put shotgun. But it just is one of those things where I'm like, it's a good card. I've never seen a shotgun deck do bad if someone's brought that to a game day, which, I mean, standalone is a different thing. And the only time I brought a shotgun deck to a campaign, it was a Mark Harrigan shotgun deck in the Innsmouth Conspiracy, and I got a full clear of that campaign due to the fact that the killing output of the shotgun was very, very, very good. So what do I frickin' do? I'm so torn. It's tough. I can't put it in good. It's definitely not within any of these tiers. It's not a space waster because it is a deck that does things. I think I'm going to put it in strong, narrowly used. I think I'm going to follow my gut for that. And I'll be honest, I feel like the other shotgun is going to be in the exact same spot. So we'll talk about that later. But I think that, if you're playing, 2 players, a shotgun deck can get the job done, but people aren't going to want to do it. And if you're playing in 3 or 4 players, shotgun decks are actually, really, really impactful. But I think it doesn't really impact your collection enough when you get it. So we're going to put it in the strong and narrowly used category. I think that it's not as strong as some of the other stuff we've seen in this strong and narrowly used, but I do think it is a powerful card. I agree. I agree. People just don't want to build around shotgun because it is so all in. But when you go all in on the things, it's like the high risk reward where the high is really good. And in a full collection, you can back up shotgun with a lot of tricks to make it so that you're able to kill small things and not spend your shotgun on it. Like toe-to-toe. That's why I love the card. Police Badge. This is a 3-cost, 2 experience. You get brain and you get actions. I think that this card is fine. I don't think this card, like, people bring this card to decks and those decks perform well, but the accessory slot in the Guardian class, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I can't recall a card that made this slot competitive for the longest time. Like, what, I mean, because, like, I'm pointing to one card as, like, the first time where I was like, oh, I think I want to run that in my accessory slot in the Guardian class. And maybe I'm missing something. But yeah, the first one is Ancestral Token and then Hallowed Mirror. Hallowed Mirror and Circle Undone kind of ate up the accessory slot completely. And even before then, Police Badge just, it's part of this design space in the Guardian class that was just never expanded on. This idea of giving actions to other people was just never really supported beyond this card, which ultimately led it to be just like live in the binder. And there are decks where this card can shine, but you have to remember that kind of even in those decks, I think that Police Badge shines less than you might think it does, at least in my humble opinion as this Arkham Horror content creator on the internet. So I'm going to put in the fine tier just because I see, like, nobody really... Yeah, but that's crazy. Police Badge was the only Guardian accessory before Hallowed Mirror, and no one fucking touched it. And even now with a full collection, people are touching it less and less. So, I don't think it's a bad card. I don't even think it's a space waster because decks can play it. So we're going to just... we're going to put it in the fine tier. Beat Cop level 0 is a good card. I know that normally I say that, like, the fine tier is where we put the cards that upgrade out of it, but Beat Cop level 0 is still impactful enough that they're still impactful enough that you're happy to run them, and they go into all your level 0 decks. And if your collection gets bigger and you still want Beat Cop 2, you're happy to play Beat Cop 0. I think you do upgrade into the other one, but at the same time, I've actually seen players, Bryn is one of them, who've kind of just stayed with Beat Cop level 0 for the majority of the campaign, because I think this is something that I've seen in the discourse a lot about Beat Cop 0, and that I see Bryn actually put into practice, and I'm also a believer of it. The 1 damage is good enough most of the time if you're playing well. And that's one of those things where, like, yeah, the upgraded Beat Cop is 3 damage, which is better than 1 damage, but it's not the biggest, most necessary upgrade that I think a lot of the community currently has while talking about Beat Cop. You're not playing Beat Cop for the damage generally, you're playing him for the consistency, and this guy gives you +1 fist, which is very, very, very good. The reason why I think that Beat Cop is less impactful, even the upgraded one, is that the Guardian upgraded ally pool is insane. There are so many very strong upgraded allies in the Guardian pool. It's kind of their thing. So, yeah, like, I think that even the upgraded Beat Cop, while still very good, there's a lot of different methods and paths you can take with your upgraded ally. And as weapons get better and the cards around those weapons get better, you have to lean on less on your fist boost from these allies to get things done, so you can play other allies as well. And then we have the upgraded B-Cop, who I'm going to put in strong and universally used. I don't think he is a staple, because as I just mentioned, I'm not going to talk too much more about this card, but as I just mentioned, there are so many allies in the Guardian upgrade pool that you generally don't need to take the space. Like, this guy doesn't always fill that space. It can be used by other allies, which means I think is very healthy one for the Guardian class. But you also can kind of choose the ally that best fits your deck. Guard Dog level 0 with the art that I don't like as much as the original art, but my opinion doesn't matter. I think that Guard Dog is strong and universally used, and I think Guard Dog has actually seen a boom in his usage once people, in the later years of Arkham here, because people realize that, changing the way that enemies interact with me, or how I can pace my turns with enemies, is actually very powerful. I've been saying this for a while, and it's going to be why a card that I'm going to be putting in the good tier pretty soon might be controversial to some people. But being able to change the sequencing of your turns to better handle enemies and being able to break the flow that enemies traditionally provide is gigantic, and a big reason why Guard Dog is so powerful. Being able to finish your turn by moving into a location with an acolyte, right? Being able to move out of your location after attacking an enemy for the last point of damage, right? Like, these are all things that allow you to spend less time fighting enemies and spend more time setting up your position to be better for the next turn, which is, I think, the best way of winning Arkham, where you're not playing just for this turn, you're playing for 3 turns down the road. And Guard Dog, I think, is a very good way of doing that. First Aid. Well, Guardians, congratulations. You have your first Space Waster. Yay! What a waste of space. This card is bad. It's atrocious healing. It costs a lot for so little, right? It's one of those things where I can't even believe that, like, in retrospect, that this card was printed in this way. Obviously, they didn't have the idea for how healing should be in this game, and I think that this is a pretty fair place to start with healing. Like, start minimal, I think, is a fair assumption, and I think they've realized that it's better paced out in other ways that we actually see kind of in some aspects for the new core set. But I think Volkgloss says it right, where even in Carolyn or Vincent, this card's bad. And if you're looking at a full collection and the healers who want all the healing cards, they don't want to play this, that should show you how bad it is and how much worse it gets when you have a smaller collection going around it. The upgraded First Aid Kit, I think, is fine. I don't think it's a good card. I think it's better than the level 0 First Aid Kit. Here, I can make this a bit bigger as well. I think it's better than the level 0 First Aid Kit, but I think ultimately it's still 3 experience. And while there are some synergies that you can do with it, I think that as a whole, we have to ask ourselves, how worth it do we think that this is worth the 3 experience? And I think outside of Carolyn, Vincent, or like Ally Rube Goldberg machines, I think that this card is just not worth it for the experience cost. I think, like, it'll do good in those decks, but I don't think it's, like, strong in those decks. I think it's fine in those decks. Physical training, that's gonna be another space waster. I'm gonna talk about I'm gonna talk about I'm gonna talk about this card a few more times for this style, this talent things, but these talents were just not it. I think the new talents are better, and as I mentioned, I think that the Survivor one of the new talents are the best, and this is the best one of them, and I also think the Survivor of the old one was the best of them. Physical training, it can be used defensively and offensively, which I think is really nice. So I think that has that going for it. But do me a favor and look at the cost of these cards, right? Like, none of these cards are freaking cheap. They're all 3, or, I mean, 2 for the 3 experience card, right? Or the first aid kit, which is, like, bad. So it's just like Guardians don't have the resources to do this, and they've never really had the resources to do this. And even as they got more economy, again, they just don't have the resources to do this. It's better spent elsewhere. Buy a wolf mask, right? Like, it does pretty much exactly what you want this card to do, but you don't need to spend 3 resources to get +1 brain or +1 fist, right? So yeah, I think this card is an easy space waster. I've had worse 4. My god, this is another space waster. I get what this card is supposed to be, right? So this card was added in the revised core. This wasn't in the official core. Both First Aid Kit 3 and I've Had Worse 4 were added in the revised core. But the thing is, I don't understand why they did this. Why they chose this card when I've Had Worse 2, which is a phenomenal card. I've Had Worse 2 is an incredible Arkham Horror the card game card, right? But including the level 4 version is just, it makes no sense because no one fucked with the level 4 version, and it's just a waste of space. It's so expensive, and the reality is that you're gonna get an emergency cash out of this as like most of its caps, right? Like you could stop a Rotting Remains or a Grasping Hands, right? But the reality is that the level 2 version, we're going to be doing the level 2 version is going to get the same impact most of the time that the level 4 version is going to get. It's just not worth it. Dodge. I think that this card is good. This is what I was talking about with Guard Dog. Being able to change the pace of the game is very, very powerful, and I think often overlooked in just kind of like the flat deck level. I think that ultimately you are going to upgrade out of Dodge, but in recent years, I have started to play Dodge in just decks that can take it, and it impacted the game in ways that I'm going to keep preaching until people start noticing, right? And you're right, Holy Helicopter, this is kind of just a good rate for healing as well. It's always been good, but I think that like Travis and I, it's like ritual candles. Travis and I often say like, there's like that, there's that meme image where it's like the line, like the curve graph, and it's like the idiots on one side, the normal people at the top where the number's really big, and then like the geniuses on the other. And it's like one of those things where I feel like that's where Dodge is, right? Like Dodge is good is kind of that thing where it's a much better card than people do give it credit for. Just because it allows you to, I think most importantly, just change the way the game is played. And it's actually been one of those things where it actually even altered my deny existences, where I started to just use my deny existences as dodges. And I liked it. And I'm so happy there's a dodge that deals damage in the new core. That card's incredible. Dynamite Blast. I think this card is good. I think Dynamite Blast also deserves more love. Sorry, I have to just get a cough drop. I think Dynamite Blast is a very strong card. And I think that it's one of those things where people look at the cost and get turned off by it, which I think is entirely fair. I think that Dynamite Blast does cost a lot of money, but there comes a point in an Arkham game, at least when I play and when I also witness other people play, where you've gotten all your assets in play and you then just start playing the game. You know, like you've done your setup and you're in the position where you start playing the game. Generally at this point you transition into events, right? That's kind of like the theory. And you kind of are just accruing resources and then playing the big events in your hand. That's kind of like how Arkham, in theory, plays for the majority of decks that exist, right? And I think Dynamite Blast is such a good capstone to that style of, like, that theoretical style of Arkham play, that I think it should be a consideration in a lot of Guardian decks, even just as a one-of. A Dynamite Blast in your back pocket can change the pace of a game in ways that you cannot even appreciate until you see it happen. And sometimes you're going to have to Dynamite Blast yourself or your teammates, and you just got to let it ride because it's usually worth it. Evidence. Okay. Evidence is an interesting card because I'll be real with all of you. I thought this card was good, and I started to put it in my decks, and it just never worked out to be played. So maybe it's one of those things where just like in theory, my idea was, I'm in this headspace where I'm used to playing it in like 3 or 4 players where there's more clues. But in 2 players, it just like never turned out. Maybe I could have like sequenced my turns better. And like, I'm kind of like torn where my gut is trying to tell me that this should be a card in fine. But my brain is telling me I do think that Evidence is a good card, because it also has good icons. But my recent play experience with Evidence is making me feel differently. So I'm just a little bit conflicted. So I just need to take some time of personal meditation on this subject. I still think it's good. I still think it's good. I think because, again, in 3 or 4 players, I think this card is a lot more impactful. And the 2 book icons means that it's never, like, really wasted. I do think it was replaced with some better cards in the new one. So, I think that is... I think that's a good place for Evidence. Hey, Time Roller, how's it going? How's it going, Spirit Juice? Extra ammunition. We go from one guy holding something to another guy holding something. Extra ammunition. I think that this card is good. This card is basically more versions of your high experienced firearm weapons. If you're going to play a firearm deck, this card is usually worth the juice, right? Like the juice is worth the squeeze. So don't really have too much to say this card. It's just impactful. So, yeah, we're going to rock with that. And then we have Vicious Blow. This card's an obvious staple. I think it's a weird thing where Vicious Blow is kind of just... Vicious Blow 0 is kind of just, like, good enough. It's like one of those things where I usually do upgrade my deductions in like higher player counts, but with Vicious Blow I'm kind of just happy to see it where it is. So I think that's a really interesting thing that kind of happens with Vicious Blow, and just also the way that enemy health works. So, but as we can see, it's a pretty alright spread here for the Guardian class. A lot of good cards, a few stinkers, but I think that the good cards are like so good that it really just like works. So I think it's the Guardian, I think, has always been a very healthy class from the core set. So I think it's very hard for them to go down with that. But I think that this is just a very nice foundation. Okay, And now we have the new core set. So again, I'm going to stress that this is all hypothetical because we don't have any sort of actual like experience with these cards, or at least for most of them. And I think that we're going to have to revisit this in a few years to kind of see where the dust settles on these cards, because we're just talking about in theory right now, so just something to keep in mind as we go through these. Bodyguard. 3 cost. Soaks for 2 and 1. He may be assigned damage dealt to other investigated location as a reaction. When Bodyguard is defeated, deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. I think Bodyguard is unfortunately probably going to be a space waster. Guard Dog, he ain't. Guard Dog, he ain't. I don't think this guy is good. So you know what, I was funnily enough when I was talking earlier about the B-Cop and how the 1 damage that he can deal is kind of overlooked because that 1 damage can really change things. But I also said that the reason you're playing this B-Cop is more for is less for the damage and more for the consistency that he provides. This guy, he gives you that 1 damage, he gives you a little bit of soak, but it's not really on the same level of Guard Dog. He's kind of like just a worse version of Guard Dog. And I know that like Guard Dog I said was very good, so a worse version of him is probably fine. And maybe he will be in practice, but I just don't see that with this guy. I think he's kind of just like been cooked from the start. And I'm going to play him. Like, I'm going to play him. But I think that he is going to... My guess is he's going to just be a space waster. That's kind of my hunch. However, the upgraded version of him, he's a 3 cost 2 experience. He now soaks for 3 and 2, and when he's defeated, you take an enemy takes 2 damage. I think the upgraded version for him is a good card. I think the upgraded version is a lot better. So you can only soak damage for other people. So just something to keep in mind. He cannot take horror. That's also the same for the level 0 bodyguard. But it's just something to keep in mind now that he also has the horror. But this is basically a baby Brother Xavier. And Brother Xavier always had fantastic text on his card. But he was just a little bit too expensive, right? Well, maybe a lot of bit too expensive. But I think the level 2 bodyguard is... this guy is like is closer to the rate that Guard Dog had. And I think that he is, he's kind of, I think he's a cool dude. I think it's a powerful card. So I'm going to put him in good. I don't think he's going to be strong, universally used. I mean, I could be wrong, right? Like, again, these are core cards, so they're going to always be there. But I think as a whole, there is a stronger ally within the core set if you're looking at a limited collection that you're probably going to run. But I do think that, like, in the Tommy Muldoon starter deck, we are going to see some really good allies show up. I don't know, it's just a hunch I have. And I'm Joe Diamond, and I'm working it. Logan Hastings, this guy is going to be a staple. He gets +1 fist. After you defeat an enemy, you get exhaust him to gain 1 resource. I think he's a very strong card. I talked about this in the spoiler video. I think that he is going to be outclassed in a full card pool when you get to upgrade in allies. But I think that he is still going to be good enough that you aren't upset if you don't upgrade out of him. Which I think is a very good place for a level 0 ally to be. Especially in the Guardian class, where, like, yeah, you don't tap into the strong allies that they have, but you can upgrade everything else around them, and this guy's going to give you good consistency. I think that's a nice place for a card to be. I think that in current, this guy is going to be gangbusters. I think he's going to be like a staple in all Guardian decks going forward. I think that 1 sanity that this guy has is going to be more relevant to than you think. How'd you compare this guy to Beat Cop Zero? In Legacy, I would probably take Beat Cop Zero over Logan Hastings just because my economy is already sorted in other ways. And I think I want to take the 1 damage over the 5 resources this guy's going to give me when I can just get economy in other ways. That's my gut. I could be wrong actually putting this into practice, but that's just my initial hunch. But I think the reality is in Legacy, I'm going to be upgrading out of this guy, and I'd be doing the same with Beat Cop Zero. Insane card in current and Chapter 2 format, though. This guy's going to be a hero for sure. Hey, M1911. It's the 45 automatic, but 1 cheaper, which I think is enough to put this into good. Now, if you're newer to Arkham, you might not understand how much of a difference 1 resource cost makes in terms of determining the power level of a card. But let me just tell you, it's bigger than you think. While resources are easier to come by in Arkham compared to other games, it still is you're still spending time to get your resources. So the less resources you have to put into something, the more in theory you get out of that card. This card's very similar to 45 automatic. Maybe in the long term, like, it'll also drop down, but because melee weapons seem to be getting weaker and firearms seem to be getting stronger, I think that that's a very notable shift. And just something for consideration when it comes to looking at all these cards. All right, so we have a new machete here. So fight, you get +1 fist for this attack. If this attacked enemy is the only enemy engaged with you, you may exhaust machete to deal +1 damage for this attack. Chew the cough drop. This is such a interesting change, isn't it? So this is something that Eric and I talked about in a video that if you're watching on YouTube, came out on Sunday. If you're watching on Twitch, is going to come out next Sunday. And I'm not the biggest fan of the designers saying that you can play either version of the card, because players will generally play the version that is stronger. I feel like the designers should just come out and say that this is essentially errata, and this is how machete is going to work going forward. I know I said previously I'm not the biggest fan of errata, but I think that there should be one of those things where, like, this is basically just like, this is what machete is now. And that's just because I feel like most people aren't going to play the new machete when you could just, like, play the old machete, right? Folks are debating whether this requires you to exhaust before or after pulling the token. Apparently it's not worded like any other card of this type. Interesting. That's really would change its power level, huh? My gut is that you would reveal it, you would exhaust before you reveal the token. That's what my gut says. Anyways, we had machete in the strong universally used. I think that this version is still going to be a good card, because you still just have a way to fight and deal extra damage. But I think that it's less good than the first machete, obviously. And I think that this is a nicer place for this to be, for the weapons to kind of have them more in parity with each other. So I think that I'm very, I'm into the change, but I just wish that, again, the designers were like, no, this is how this one is played. You must use this version. That's just, I think that would just be, in my opinion, cleaner, but who knows what will happen there. All right, Sledgehammer, 3 cost, 3 experience is an action fight. This attack deals +1 damage. Double action fight. You get +3 fists for this attack. If you succeed, you may exhaust Sledgehammer for this attack deal +2 damage, and it takes up 2 hand slots. So this is what I was talking about earlier. We saw this with Machete, but it's so hard to evaluate these melee weapons because they are looked at so differently if you're talking about Legacy, if you're talking about Current, if you're talking about Chapter 2, right? So in Legacy, I think this card is actually pretty bad, right? I don't think it's like, sorry, I think it's fine. Because the reality is that most of the time, you're just going to run like a Runic X and have it just be better, right? And then this card is going to just be like a placeholder until you can get to the upgraded Sledgehammer, which is fine, like not bad, but I think that overall, how we're used to melee weapons it's hard to evaluate where Sledgehammer is going to be. If you're looking at this in Current, this card is going to be probably lower rate until like Hemlock Veil rotates out, right? Because why play Sledgehammer when you can just play Blessed Blade 4, right? And then we have Chapter 2, where this is kind of like the big melee weapon that you would want to upgrade into in the Guardian class. So it's a very hard card to evaluate just because it's so different than what melee weapons were going to be, or what we were expecting melee weapons to be. And I think that ultimately, this is a much healthier change for the game, but I have a suspicion that melee weapons are going to ultimately be less relevant in Legacy when players are just going to take the cards that are stronger and just play those cards. And I think what the designers are doing is good here, because I'd rather this just be as it is printed here. But it's so hard to like look at this, because like I want to, like, when I play Sledgehammer, I'd play it in Daniela, which is good. She's in the core set because she already gets to attack at 6 when she has Logan Hastings in play, right? Would I take this in Mark Harrigan right now, right? I don't know. I mean, I might, but I'd also just, again, be like, again, I'm looking at, again, like Current and Chapter 2 versus Legacy. And I was looking at these tier lists in the past of like what this card would be going forward, right? Like, what is this as the new core set? And I think that Sledgehammer, that's tough. It's so tough. Just because it's so different. I do think it is. I'm going to put it in good. But it's like on the edge of good. But I still think that top action actually is more relevant. I mean, like, just having a way to fight and deal +1 damage is still what you're looking for. You do have to find ways to get that fist, but maybe there's going to be more, like in the Tommy Muldoon deck. There already is some stuff in the core set to help with it. But, I mean, I think that realistically the Endurance is actually a way of just 5 resources to make your Sledgehammer better in the long term. Like, I mean, I don't know, it costs more for those, but like that's like a plan that is good enough, right? But I think that the melee weapons are just very hard to evaluate. All right, the Winchester Model 12. I'm not going to read the card here because the text is too tiny on my display screen here. Sorry. But this is basically just like a new shotgun. It costs 1 less, 1 more experience, a few other minor changes. I'm going to put it in the same tier as the old shotgun, which is strong, narrowly used, and we're going to put that in the same with the new one. I think that it is still a very strong card, but I think it's going to be just as narrow in the long term, so I'm going to put it there. I think the cost is better for 4. I wish it was 4 cost, 4 experience still, but what can you do? What can you do? Endurance! 2 costs, lightning bolt, spend 1 resource, you get +1 fist for the skill, +2. This is an attacker evasion, and then spend 1 resource, get +1 foot, +2 foot, instead of this is an attacker evasion. What on earth do I think of this card? So I think we have the groundwork for looking at these effects with the masks, right? And I think the top 3 masks were the Sparrow Mask, the Wolf Mask, and the Fox Mask, right? So I put the Survivor one in the good tier. I'm gonna the question I'm asking myself is this card good enough, and is there enough resource generation within the Guardian class for this card to be good, or is it gonna live in fine? It's not a space waster because I actually think it's I think the +2 turning them into guts as turning them into overpowers or manual dexterities is a big enough, like a relevant boost enough for that 1 resource, that you're basically just spending 1 resource for an overpower that doesn't draw, which I think is at its baseline fine, right? I think I am going to go out on a limb and say Endurance is good. I think that these are probably the only 2 that I'm going to call good. And I think the reason why I think this card is good is I think that this card might have Marvel Champion syndrome to it. Which is, if you haven't played Marvel Champions, a lot of your deck building in Marvel Champions, you end up running a lot of one-ofs in your deck, because if you just find it and set it and then use it when you need it, that's kind of like the play pattern for that game. And for some reason, Endurance is giving me that vibe. I'll play 1 Endurance in my deck, and it could feasibly stay there for the entire campaign, or till like scenario 6. And if I play it, I'll probably use it again in that window where it shifts from from assets to events. Excuse me. Endurance is kind of like an event at that point after you play it. Excuse me. And then if I don't draw it, I'm not really bothered by it. It's kind of like where I'm thinking. I could be wrong. Again, this is very speculative, so who knows actually where this is going to end up, but that's kind of my hunch looking at this now. Resilience, 3 costs, soaks for 2 and 2. Sorry for the silence, I'm just mulling this card over. It's going to be in one of the bottom 2 tiers for sure. That wasn't silence, that was you announcing the text of the card. Okay, Holy Helicopter, that was pretty good. That's pretty funny, not gonna lie. I think this card is fine, trending towards Space Waster. People like assets that soak for you, right? And I think the rate for this soak is pretty okay. But I think that you're going to upgrade out of it pretty quick. I think that it's alright for a level 0 deck. And I think that you'll get out of it in the long term. I think that I think that people will play this card, so I'm going to put it above the Bodyguard. I'm going to put it in the fine tier. I think the card is fine. Counterattack. This is a 1 cost, 1 experience, fast. Play when enemy attacks an investigate location before resolving an attack. Cancel the attack, deal 1 damage to that enemy. That card is going to be strong and universally used. Uppercut. Hey, enemy. You know, like that. I love art where a humanoid animal, a humanoid creature is getting the shit kicked out of them. Apparently, that's my favorite style of art. I mean, I also like the new Vicious Blow. I know some people don't, but I mean, I think in all fairness, the old Vicious Blow art is phenomenal. Like, it's just an amazing piece of art. This one I don't think is bad, but I can see why people like this one more, because it's just like the composition and colors are insane, right? But yeah, this is another one of a humanoid creature getting hit by something. I love it. So yeah, the reason why I like counterattack, I talked about dodge earlier, and this is a dodge that pings, and that's really good. That's really good. Like, yeah, it costs 1 resource, so like that's 1 experience. The dodge costs 1 resource as well, but I think that as a whole this is a really nice thing. And I'm now going to upgrade my counterattacks, my dodges into counterattacks when I play in Legacy, and I'm going to love it. I'm going to love it. You know who else going to love it? Combat Diana. Ooh, she's going to like it. Nice job, counterattack. We're proud of you. Lesson learned. Play after enemy attacks, you discover 1 clue your location, 1 cost. This is the evidence replacement. I think that as a whole, it's slightly worse than evidence. I think there's ways to take advantage of it in other stuff. Like, you can sequence it like in ways that are more interesting, but the icons are slightly worse. The effect is about equally as restrictive as the other one, but it doesn't advance the game in a positive way. So I'm going to put lesson learned into the fine category. I don't think it's a bad card, but I'm happy to play it, but I'll probably upgrade out of it sooner rather than later. Right tool for the job. 1 cost event. Search the top 9 cards of your deck for a tool or weapon asset and add it to your hand and shuffle your deck. Okay, so this is prepared for the worst, but helps you find a tool now instead. And the icons are slightly worse, if I remember correctly. I think like prepared for the worst is a fist or a book, if I'm remembering that right. I'm not going to check. I'm just going to assume I'm right. Now, I know that there are people out there, and you know who you are, who think that prepared for the worst is a waste of space and a waste of time. And I think that that is a very reductive form of card analysis, because I think that from the perspective that they are talking about and how they build their decks, it's true. Prepared for the worst in that deck where they would rather run any weapon in that slot instead. Prepared for the worst is a waste of time and a waste of a deck slot. And I think the reason I'm talking about prepared for the worst is because rifle tool for the job is essentially the same thing. While in that case, it's right that they just want to run another weapon over prepared for the worst or right tool for the job. The reality is as well is that if you're playing a type of deck that has 1 weapon you want to find, that's where that card comes up in value. So it's, again, that's why I think it's a very reductive form of card analysis and is not really like engaging conversation to have when it comes to evaluating a card. And I think that rightful tool for the job sits in a similar place, but the tool thing is actually very interesting. I think the tool thing is actually a very interesting change to be able to find things that prepared for the worst couldn't. An example, just on the top of my head, is Agatha can dig up her Ocula Obscura with this, which I think is a really cool thing for her to have for some more consistency with that. I think that, like prepared for the worst, right tool for the job is going to be strong and universally used, but I think as your card pool gets bigger, and you have more options, this card will become weaker, right? And as your card draw gets better, as your collection grows, right tool for the job will get weaker. Like if you have Backpack 2, for example, right? Like, why would I play that? But then you can play right tool for the job. You play right tool for the job into Backpack, which is really nice. But I think in the current format, right tool for the job is going to be impactful. And I think that in Chapter 2, it's going to be impactful. And I think that Prepared for the Worst, I think, is still strong and universally used. But I understand why people don't play it. And I understand why people do play it. And I think that there are reasons why, if you look at your deck makeup, you find the best use for it. And I think that also, again, player counts change things. So, yeah. I think it's a good card, but I think that it will drop down to good when you look when we look at this again, maybe in the long term. Kind of like if I had, if Prepared for the Worst was in the core set, I'd probably put it in good. But I think also the tool really is, I think that's going to make this card more relevant than it seems compared to Prepared for the Worst on first glance. Scene of the Crime, that's a staple. This card is an incredible Guardian clue-getting card, and I was actually so happy to see this in the new core set. I think it's a phenomenal piece to get clues within the Guardian class, and it's everything that they want. And Logan Hastings only makes it cost 1 when you kill the enemy that you got the clues off of. So happy to see this here. And Vicious Blow as well is going to... Whoa, what the hell? Get up here, Vicious Blow. You're going to go in the stable tier as well, for all the reasons we talked about earlier. Okay, there are our 2 tier lists that we got here for how cards look. So we can do a quick comparison as we kind of check this out. So again, there's more cards in the revised core than there is in this one, so there's gonna be more cards in all these places. So we kind of just look at like the above the line and like look at the foundation that they're building with here, like above the strong, narrowly used. And I think that it's I think that as a whole, the Guardians are less good of a foundation compared to the previous Guardian in the OG core. But I still think they're in a nice place, and I think it's a strong foundation to build with. I think like Seeker's kind of the same, where they were less strong in this new version, and I think a big reason for that is just because they are so powerful already, and they can become down a little bit to kind of match with the other ones, and I think that's a healthier place for them to be. Would you agree the Scene of the Crime is the nicest one out of evidence and lesson learned? 100%. It's not even close. To be honest with you, it's not even close. Scene of the Crime is like leagues better than them. I do wish Guardian got an economy card for Chapter 2 core, not really counting the ally. Helps, but everything is rather expensive like usual. I think that economy at level 0 should be saved for the economy class. So what I'm saying is, in the core set, I think that like burst economy should really only fall onto the rogue class if everything goes perfectly, I think. That's my personal opinion, because I feel like economy should be restricted to classes when everyone has emergency cash in the core set. And then I'd rather them flesh it out in other ways. Like, I think like Logan's a good thing to actually help the Guardian economy more than expected. But I think that emergency cash still will do a long way. And I would rather rogues be the guys who still get to get the economy cards, just to give them that slice of the pie to really, really make it more. And I do think, yes, I think the Investigator starter decks are going to have economy. And I think that that's better than them being in the core set, in my opinion, because I think emergency cash is actually just good enough in just the core set. Okay, well, Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. We're going to be doing the Rogue one and the Mystic one once those come out. I'm probably not going to do Neutral because the only thing that we really are going to have to talk about there, assuming that the rest of the skill cycle comes out, which at this point they probably will, is the flashlight and the hand crank and maybe the upgrades. But I'm probably not going to touch that. It's just not interesting to me to talk about those because they're going to be it's going to basically be 1-to-1, right? Like they're going to just be the same. But meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.